On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, breaking news about a change in the leadership team at Synereo. Dash is the privacy-focused digital currency that offers transactions with instant confirmations. Its unique, decentralized decision-making and self-funding system make it an ideal choice as a stable and secure digital cash. Click the link in the video description to learn more. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I am your host, Chris Coney. So let's get into today's news. So I'm thinking about adding a new segment to the Cryptoverse. Back when I started the Cryptoverse, it used to be in two halves. The first half was like a market review, but it was way too long. And then the second half was the news. And a number of people, they said they really liked the market review. So I'm thinking, well, how do I bring it back without it taking over the whole show? So I'm thinking like this is an experimental version. I'm just going to talk about like the biggest winner and the biggest loser of the day, right? And we'll see how it goes. So we'll do the biggest winner of the day first. I'm looking on CoinMarketCap, and I'm looking at the 24-hour change numbers. So the biggest winner of the day in 15th position is Iconomy, the Iconomy coin. The price today is 22 cents, having gained 11% in the last 24 hours. Now, Iconomy is, they have a terrible website that doesn't really explain what the hell it is very well, but it helps people get in and out of the Ethereum economy. It provides an easy way to sort of buy, sell, and trade Ethereum. That's about as much as I know about it. So anyway, they've got a nice little trend line going on recently, and they've gained 11% in the last 24 hours. The biggest loser of the day is Steam, with a loss of 7.35%, putting a Steam token at 17.7 cents. Let's call it 18 cents. And Steam has been, well, it's been flat for the last 3 or 4 days, and then previous to that, it's been going down according to this graph. So we'll keep an eye out on everything else. In terms of the Bitcoin price, I have to have a look at the chart today because we've got some really interesting things going on. If you look at the Bitcoin Wisdom chart and you look at the Bitstamp chart, which is the one I'm looking at, you see this great big spinning top, which is where it's actually the price for today. The price hit a high of $793.27. I don't know if you watched the other day episode of the Cryptoverse where I said what we need to do to see a explosive move up is to break $780, then $800, and pretty much then we're off at the gallop. But looking at this, the market really isn't sure which way it wants to go. I mean, really indecisive. The price right now it's hitting the my Fibonacci retracement line at just under $780. And it sort of wanted to go up there, and then it came down. It came down to what? The low was 765, and now it's trading at 776. So at the minute, there seems to be a pretty good balance between buyers and sellers, or rather the market doesn't want to commit one way or the other. But something's going to happen very soon, especially since now we've got this big peep above the $780 mark that nearly hit 800. So in terms of the news today, once again, I've turned to Reddit for this breaking story because I heard about it over yesterday, I think it was, but none of the major publications have covered it yet, so I'm having to cover it. Actually, I tell a lie. Reddit was actually the second place that I went after receiving a tip from a subscriber about what they thought was going on. I saw talk about this yesterday, but I didn't really pay any mind. And then when this subscriber contacted me with a long email asking if I would look into it, I went to Reddit and I found this. Now, their message from this subscriber to me included a suggestion of all kinds of drama, which I'm not going to cover because that stuff's impossible to verify as fact, and more importantly, people completely lose their objectivity when they're emotionally charged. And nothing gets us more emotionally charged than thinking that someone is trying to steal our money, right? So let's see what sense we can make of the facts that we have. If the Synereo AMP token collapses in value, then I personally stand to lose about $150, which is what I pledged to the crowdfund. But I feel no emotion about the prospect of losing that money because I followed my own investing rule, which I talk about regularly on the Cryptoverse, which is I only invested as much as I could afford to lose. So if I lose that $150, it will make not a blind bit of difference to my life in any way, shape, or form. If it did, that tells me I invested too much in the first place. So what we know for sure then in this scenario is that Dor-Konforty posted this article on the Synereo blog yesterday. I'm looking at it on Reddit, but it's actually on blog.synereo.com. So let me pick out a couple of pertinent bits. It actually opens by saying, "Dear all, today on December the 12th, a majority of Synereo Limited's shareholders voted in favour of Greg-Meredith's removal from the company's board, as well as for the cancellation of his consultancy agreement as chief scientist of Synereo." Now that sounds fairly normal to me. This kind of thing happens all the time. I mean, when you form a limited company, part of the documentation contains a shareholders agreement, a list of shareholders and stakeholders, how much voting power each shareholder has, and how often the board meetings will be held, all that kind of thing. Now, assuming all of the terms the board agreed to when they joined have been followed, their decision to remove someone from the board by majority vote is perfectly legal. And also it says here that the cancellation of his consultancy agreement, again, as long as they followed the rules set out in the consultancy agreement for termination, then again, it's perfectly legal. Now, you might say, but Chris, there was a conspiracy. The board got together and decided to force Greg out. Now, that's a possibility, That happens all the time as well in companies, in the mainstream financial system. And while collaborating with fellow shareholders to vote someone off the board may be unethical, it's not technically illegal. Again, as long as the shareholders followed the agreements. So that's the objective view. Now let's take the subjective view. From what I've read, there's concern amongst Synereo investors that the project and the AMP tokens for them derived a lot of value from Greg-Meredith's skill set and his involvement in the project. The fear is that with him off the project, their faith in Synereo is now weakened, and perhaps the product now isn't going to be what they thought it was going to be. Well, I can guarantee you that myself. Synereo will be different with his contribution versus without his contribution. The question is, will the product be better or worse, and better or worse by what measure? And that's where the fear is. If you were basing your confidence in the project heavily on Greg, then it's perfectly understandable that his exit would shake your confidence. The blog post, in fact, goes on to say here, which I've highlighted in orange, on the 20th of January, Synereo will reveal its new development plan for a distributed social network, operating according to the principles of the attention economy and granting real value to AMPs. Our technical team is crafting a viable roadmap for a usable product to be staged in a reasonable time frame within our existing budget. Now, what I don't understand is why they are now having to rewrite the development plan. Why don't they just continue on the same path? I mean, if Greg owned some intellectual property that Synereo was relying on, that would explain it. However, if I wrote the shareholders agreement for Synereo, I would have had everyone agree to signing over their creations to the company, and then the people would own shares in that company. So the company would own the property, and then the people would own shares in the company, hence protecting everyone, including the investors, from any kind of power games. So if I owned an intellectual property that the company was relying on, that's a point of leverage. I could threaten to pull the rug from under the company by saying, well, I'm going to take my intellectual property. And I would, if I was writing the shareholders agreement, I would mitigate that risk by saying, right, if you are going to come and work with this company, you need to put it into the pot, essentially. One of your things you're investing is your intellectual property. But check this bit out. In the yellow, I've highlighted this bit that says, the last few weeks have been emotionally challenging for us all. In the spirit of moving forward and in order to allow for a successful incubation of this new trajectory, we've established a cooling down period on our communication channels. Greg has been temporarily removed from the Synereo Slack channel in order to allow him, as well as ourselves, to digest the recent events and allow the Synereo team to focus on delivering our product. He and everyone else is more than invited to rejoin us after the holidays in a refreshed spirit of cooperation and friendship. Now, no matter whether there's any shenanigans going on or not, this is a very wise move for the reason that I mentioned earlier. When we are in an emotionally charged state, we tend to lose our objectivity. And we tend to want some kind of channel to vent the emotion. I would suggest that the best way to do that is to write in a private journal, talk to your friends, family, or see a counsellor. Those are some of the methods I've personally made very good use of. And then when the emotion calms down and everyone comes to their senses, then action can be taken. I mean, even if Greg wishes to object to this move or to fight it, I believe he'll be in a much better state to succeed at that if he takes the time out first to allow the emotional state to dissolve. Now, one last thing I wanted to say relates to the Synereo promo video. But at the moment, if I click over here, the Synereo website is offline, which is also not going to do much to reassure people. But what I wanted to say was how surprised I am that there has been this kind of a change at Synereo of all companies. One of the things that attracted me to Synereo was the fact that they made great effort in their promotional video to focus on the team. And more specifically, they spoke about how many of their team members start the day with meditation as a tool to kind of keep stress levels down, tap into creativity, and for all the reasons that I use meditation. That somehow doesn't match with the board of directors voting out Greg. Maybe these board of directors aren't part of the team that, engaged in this practice, perhaps. If they had a heart-to-heart and came to a consensus that it was best for Greg to leave, then the public message they put out would have said, Greg has decided to resign. But that's not what this blog post of theirs says. The fact that he's been voted out means Greg didn't actually want to leave. I would suggest, though, that everyone not get bogged down in the drama, which means don't engage in speculation. If you want to do something constructive, then maybe contact Greg and Dor and see if each of them separately wants to come on the Cryptoverse and present their side of the story or something. I'm willing to give both of them an unfiltered platform to say their piece without taking a side myself. Other than that, if you've got any other breaking news on this, then feel free to send it over to me. So thanks for joining me today, guys. If you liked this episode, hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Please leave me a comment below with some feedback and get subscribed. And please support the Cryptoverse and boost cryptocurrency adoption by going to cryptoversity.com/podcasts and becoming a patron. From as little as $10 a month, you can secure Cryptoversity's future, get unlimited access to all Cryptoversity courses, and access a private patrons-only chat group where you get direct access to me. That's all for today, guys. I will be back tomorrow with another episode of the Cryptoverse. Until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.